Okay, good morning. Welcome back. It is Wednesday morning, so it is time for some product coffee. And today we're going to be building some experiments that help to deliver real value in your products. And we're going to use AI to help. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But first, we're going to talk about what happens when you have the problem right, but your users just aren't adopting the solution. So let's meet our first panel first off. First up, he likes earthquakes a little too much, and so he built a Raspberry Pi seismograph to prove it. Nandu Shah is president of the Atlanta CTO Club. Welcome back, Nandu. Up next, he's got high passion, high impact, and occasionally high fiber. It's John Field, VP of Product at Talogy. This guy is building products, wrangling 8 kids, and still not pitching the Netflix reality series that we'd all binge. It's Garren DiPasquale. Welcome back, Garren. And I don't know if he's Obi-Wan or Han Solo, call him what you want, but he is the legend of product training. Steve Johnson, CEO of Product Growth Leaders. Welcome back, Steve. And I am Jason Brett. I am still not cool enough to have an MC introduce me. All right, so let's get started. Today's article is by Mike Watson over at Product Party, and he wrote an article called "Your Stakeholders Aren't Wrong About the Problems," which is often true. A lot of times we roll our eyes when we get these feature requests that feel like they're gut instinct from a sales leader or from an executive somewhere in the organization. But Mike reminds us that those instincts are usually born out from real pain. These people, our stakeholders, are in their positions usually because they've got a ton of experience. So the problem isn't whether these stakeholders are necessarily right or wrong about the problems. It's whether the solutions that we build actually get adopted. So today we're going to dig into why delivery doesn't always equal adoption, some of the blind spots teams hit when they get post-launch detective work, and how iteration often makes the difference between a feature that flops and one that flies high. So let's get started first off, and let's just go right into it with Nandu.
I'm sorry to disappoint, but I don't have a hot take for you today. I'm in violent agreement with virtually everything I'm reading here.
That's a hot.
Engineers tend to talk about the XY problem. I think isn't it Steve who always says your customers are almost always right about their problems and almost always wrong about the solutions? In engineering, the XY problem is I want to use X to solve Y, focusing on the X, focusing on the solution instead of focusing on the actual problem and what alternative methods you might have to attack it. And I think iteration, I just don't have that much to argue with against this. Now, it is extremely tricky to tell any version of customer or user or stakeholder that they're doing it the wrong way. And that, I think, is probably the crux of the problem to solve here. But taking bite sizes, steps, and iterating towards a solution always just seems like the right answer. I'm going to yield the rest of my time.
All right. Let's jump over to John. John, we oftentimes you get that. Here's a solution I want you to go build. And it may even be the right solution, but then it doesn't get adopted. How are you thinking about that?
I'm going to take a page out of Nandu's book. Unfortunately, I loved this article. I loved the article. The things that jumped out to me as the most important thing is that it talked about having amplitude or some kind of analytics partner be able to measure where the friction is occurring. Right. So you come up with a great idea and that people get 2/3 of the way down the path and then they bail. Okay, why are they bailing? It gives you an opportunity to have a conversation. And then I want to make sure that I get the quote, but it said, oh nuts. It said, check if it's a discovery problem and not a product problem. My guess, and a lot of times, right, when you see that amplitude data or somebody that says we have not made it far enough, like they're not actually getting the value that they want, there is some aspect of the problem that we didn't understand or we didn't articulate correctly. And by not understanding the problem, well, that means there's a reason to iterate on the solution. I yield the rest of my time to the gentleman with 8 children.
All right, Garren. Thanks, John. Garren, how can we?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll try to do my best here. So I also enjoyed the article, and directionally I agree. I think I'm with the rest of the panel on this, but I will say I think it exposes a larger underlying problem. So he's talking about research and the business having gut feelings. And I guess my 3 points were, one, I think that individual contributors are too abstracted from the problem in most organizations. And this leads to just not being able to be on the same page with the business's gut feeling. It leads us generally to be at odds with them. And that kind of, that puts me to my second point, which is probably my most controversial, which is I think that design honestly has become an enemy of the business, or at least it appears to be an enemy of the business. And I guess what I mean by this is that I've certainly been in many situations. I think as a designer, I taught myself to be a skeptic. The business comes in with an idea, and we're not really a partner for them. They don't feel like that we're really there to help them to see that idea through. They see us more as somebody who's trying to essentially invalidate that. Show me the research. Let's do research. That doesn't feel very good from the business perspective, especially if it's somebody high up in an organization, executive stakeholder. Convincing them that their gut feeling is wrong right out of the gate generally makes us not the best partner to the business. And then lastly, I think the core underlying issue here is that good product design is much, if not more, an outcome of product culture than it is product process. And I think this article is right, and I agree with it, but directionally at the foundation, many of these problems are actually cultural problems that then get exposed in the product process. Ooh, 10 seconds left.
Ooh,
all right.
There you go. Nice. Just real quick, part of the reason that we've got the timer going here is we want to hear your voice too. If you're sitting here in the Zoom call with us, we'd love your thoughts on navigating this gap between having the right, when there's a solution that's not being adopted, or navigating the conversation around the solution or the problem that's being handed to you as a product person. What are your thoughts? What are your experience? What's worked for you? We want to hear from you as well. Let's jump over to Steve Johnson. Hey, Steve.
Hello. I love the article, sure. I immediately reacted to anecdote is not data. And yet I'm known to be scornful of pretty much everybody. But when the president comes in and says, God spoke to me in a dream and we need to add AI to our product, I'm absolutely with the product managers going, why? What problem you're trying to solve and so forth. But the president has often, or the founder often, has by success. The first product went well. Right? He had this great idea. He hired his best friend from college to do the programming. He called one of his frat buddies to come take over sales. Company blew up and everybody's, wow, this is tremendous. And the thing is, that's one story out of 100. There were another 99 that went through the same process and cratered. So the president, well done. You built a thing that people wanted, probably because you wanted it too. But the founder was in the market. That's where the idea came from.
Yep.
And as we grow, it's like we need to make sure that this isn't just a pipe dream, but it's something real. And so I liked a lot of the techniques he was talking about in this article, in particular, visiting customers and watching them do their work, which is not certainly what you get from a solution. But given that I have no time left, I'm still going to go forward. I'm going to run over my time and take Garren's and John's time. The big problem there of the article that he's talking about is we had this idea, maybe a good idea, maybe a bad idea, but it didn't do well in the market. And that's because we race to build.
Yeah.
We had this idea, let's start programming. We didn't do any solution validation. We didn't do a couple of different design iterations and share it with customers. But bigger than that, we didn't prepare the organization to deliver this thing to market. So suddenly I'll do a quick one. I had a massive launch. And on the day of launch, I got a call from the front desk. They were fielding hundreds of calls about this new product that they didn't know anything about. And what do you want me to do with all these messages I've taken? Oh, we forgot to tell the people who answered the phone that we had a new launch. So we pissed away a lot of money. So when you start thinking about where did it fail? Sure, maybe we built the wrong thing and we need to build into that the rigor of validating the problem, validating the solution. But we also need to remember that building, at the end of build, we are not yet done. We can release something, but it doesn't sound in these stories in this article that they launched.
Yeah.
And those are entirely different things. Building is one thing, and you can release something, but marketing and sales and the go-to-market teams are the ones that are launching the product. And that's where your adoption usually fails.
That's a great insight and a great point. And one of the things that I thought about a lot when I was, and you might want to put me on a timer too, Devin, because I don't have any leftover time. But one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading this article is the famous Superhuman product market fit engine. And I love that story because I think it falls right into what Mike was talking about here is they launched a product, Superhuman. They delivered their MVP, they delivered their product, and they figured out who was adopting it and who wasn't adopting it. And then they went and studied so they did both. They looked at who was and wasn't. But where they really concentrated their energy was by focusing on who was adopting their features and their products and why. And they built around that. They focused in and spent more time marketing to and selling to and promoting to the people who were getting the most value out of their product. And that allowed them to create a product that was really well designed and built for a specific segment of the population, and then they expanded back out from there. That was one thing that I took away as part of the antidote to the problem that Mike is laying out. We build something, we think it ought to solve the problem, it doesn't get the adoption, and I know we've all been through that in one way, shape, or form. And the challenge that he was trying to overcome or get people to think differently about is the balance between the sunk cost fallacy and actually protecting your investment. We talk all the time about don't double down on something that's not working, but at the same time, we've already invested in building this solution that we think ought to work. Let's spend a little bit of investment on figuring out why people aren't adopting it in the first place. And part of our job as product managers is balancing that trade-off, that risk, and talking about the process and the approach we're going to take to solving that problem for the business so that we stay in alignment. I had about 3 other things that I felt like talking about as well, but I want to open up the floor to our audience here on Zoom as well. If you've got a take on this fundamental problem, if you've got a story about how you've addressed it or felt or encountered a product launch that didn't go as planned, that did not get the adoption that you expected, where did you find the opportunity for improvement in that? What did you do? What did you learn? And Nandu's already got his hand up. Bring it on up, buddy.
Okay, I do have somewhat of a hot take.
Yay!
It just took me longer than usual. I'm slow today. I'm gonna give you a counterexample. So many years ago, roughly 20 years ago, I worked at a company that was selling T1 service. So that's 1.5 megabits up and down, which is paltry by today's standards. I get 8 times that on my phone for cellular. But back then it was a big deal. At the prices we were selling it, T1 service to SMBs, it was wildly popular until after a few years, Comcast, so that's 1.5 megabits. Comcast started selling their standard residential service for $50 a month, and it was like 40 megabits. You could speed test it at home. It's 40 megabits asymmetric. So you get 40 megabits down and some fraction of that up. And all of a sudden, all of these small business owners who are paying us hundreds of dollars a month for really good service are at home speed testing and seeing a multiple of that at a fraction of the price. And I was talking to, I think it was the head of product at the time, who was like, yeah, but here's all the things that our users don't understand. And I was like, there is no amount of telling your users that they don't need 40 megabits that's going to work. If I can spend less money and get quantifiably bigger numbers, even if I'm not using all of it, that is absolutely a thing we need to fix with our product development and not with shaping user behavior.
Jason, I have a real quick quip. I've never needed to know whatever follows the phrase, what you need to know is. Because that phrase always means we've got some internal junk going on, or we made some internal decisions. But what you have to understand is never a good thing to say to a customer.
If you're explaining, you're losing.
Right. And I did that in 20 seconds. Jason, come on back.
Jason, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Jason.
There we go. Devin had the smart thing going here. So yeah, the great point. And when I love what you said, but if I want to make it a t-shirt slogan, Nandu, I'm going to say, if you're excusing, you're losing. There you go. New product coffee
that's
t-shirt
brilliant.
coming
Ship it.
your way.
That's merch. That's merch, cash in the bank there, Jason.
All right. Listen, part of what we do now is at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the meetup, this is a meetup that we're actually doing each week. And my networking overlay is not working, Devin, but we want to welcome you. If you're here in the Zoom room with us, if you're out there on YouTube, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're watching us. But if you're here, we'd love to have you here in the Zoom chat with us. This is a virtual meetup. We're getting together to meet and get to know other product people in the community, in the worldwide product management community. We'd love you to turn on your camera and join us here on the chat. Introduce yourself. Tell us what has your attention right now. And by what has your attention, maybe you've got something that you're working on. Maybe you've recently had a launch that you're really proud of, or solved a problem you're really proud of, or there's a product management topic you're trying to solve for that you'd love some thoughts and input on. We would love to have you introduce yourself to everybody else here. So let's jump over first and welcome back. We've got Blossom on the line today. Hey, Blossom, how are you? We've talked about stakeholders, adoption, and iteration. Today, we're going to dig into the experiments that actually make products succeed. Avinash Mahalingam and Deepa Krishnamurthy are joining us today to get deep into building AI product success through smarter experience. Let's welcome them, and you can take it away, Avinash.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jason. We are super excited. And Deepa, do you want to start off? Kick us
Yes,
off.
absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. I am super, super excited. In fact, Avinash and I have planned a power-packed set of learnings, I would say, learnings through our experimentation that we would love to share to this community. I already get a lot of positive vibes from this community, so I'm super excited. So let's dive in directly with, I love numbers, so I'm going to start with a number. And probably most of you are aware of this as well, that 88% of AI pilots fail to reach production. That's 9 out of 10 that doesn't make it. So in the next 45 to 50 minutes, Avinash and we're going to share our learnings and also what we have developed as a framework that will help us succeed putting our products in production, or at least decide early on during experimentation whether this product or feature should go into production or not. So all these decision criteria and how to do, we've developed a framework based on our experience, and we'd love to share today. So what we've planned today is we'll take one single case study that Avinash and I have worked on, and we have successfully deployed this in an enterprise level company, and people are using it. It's thriving. So we thought we'll take this case study and explain to you our framework as we go through the journey of how we built this. So for today's case study, meet our two protagonists, Sarah and Peter. Now, Sarah is a person who's a developer or an engineer or a product manager, and she's constantly having questions about the developer tools because she's a developer or a product manager, and she wants to ask a lot of questions. Either she goes and checks in the documentation, or there is for example, a Slack channel or a Teams channel, and she's going to ask a lot of questions there. Now, we are all set in our companies, right? We have had so many numerous discussions day in and out, and this is going to keep continuing, right? So we have also faced a lot of frustration being Sarah. One is sometimes we get delayed responses, sometimes it is inconsistent, sometimes the person who answers will not know the context if we don't give enough context. And if we are in a hurry, we're not going to give enough context as well, right? So there is a lot of frustration going on from Sarah's end. Now meet the second protagonist, who is Peter. And what does Peter do? Peter is this product expert or that on-call engineer or that customer service person who's going to answer all of the questions that Sarah and other folks are going to ask. Now, this person is also constantly bogged down and has a lot, because a lot of questions come in, will not be able to focus on development or the product design and so on.